What's up, everybody? How's it going? Hope you're doing well. Happy New Year, because I think this is the first one we've done for the new year, so I'm super excited about kicking off 2020.
Yeah.
And we got a great guest on our show today, and I'm going to let Levi kind of introduce him. But welcome, guys. We're super excited to have you. And we're in the new space.
Welcome back. New space.
So, new
what
space.
do you think? Hopefully you like it.
Yeah,
Still
hopefully you
polishing
like
it
it.
off a little bit, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yep. By I think tomorrow we're going to get our big sign, be hung up. So we'll actually have that says Access Omaha.
Boom.
So then I think we'll be official. So right now it's not official yet, but it's all good. So Levi, take it over.
Yes. All right. Well, awesome. Thanks so much, Ryan. Good to see you guys. Welcome back. Thanks so much for tuning in. So, of course, another episode of Access Omaha. We've got a really cool guest here for you guys. Actually, someone who's very interesting, and I connected with rather in kind of a fortuitous way. This gentleman's name is Matt Hebert, and among many things, he is an architectural engineer with the Army Corps of Engineers. He is a self-published author several times over, as well as he's done things like television commercials, written screenplays. He has also, I think, dabbled in wedding planning. Is that correct? Wedding planning.
Wow.
And officiating. And then also, to add to the list of pedigrees, he also owns a home inspection company, if I'm not mistaken.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, very interesting guy. Him and I actually got connected through a client of mine that I did a mortgage transaction for, who ended up actually purchasing his house, the house that Matt owned, and it was a for sale by owner transaction, so we got really friendly throughout the process, had to do a lot of communication and stuff like that, but it was a good chance for us to connect, and I knew he had a really interesting story, so I'm like, man, I gotta have that guy on. I want to dig a little deeper, go beneath the surface here, try to figure out a little bit more about what makes this guy tick. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, of course.
So to a couple clarifications, I like to sum all of those things up. Entitle myself a jerk of all trades.
A jerk of all trades.
We did miss, and on my way over here, I thought this would be a really great venue, and you two would be the perfect folks to talk to about sand sculpture. Also, that was a thing that was in my past. A thing that was here in Omaha for about 10 to 12 years that isn't anymore, and that I think would be really cool to see that come back. So if we can touch on that at some point.
Oh yeah,
that would be fun. So yeah, if you'd like, I can kind of kick off talking about myself, unless there was anything else.
Oh no, we want you to talk
Any
about
others?
yourself.
All right, great.
We want you to talk about yourself. Absolutely.
All right, so there's going to be kind of two tracks here. First of all, I apologize in advance for my voice. I'm just getting over something. I'm probably going to say anyways a lot, and there's also going to be a lot of yes, so's. That's just the way I talk. So anyways, kidding. Personal track, origin story, what I do now, a lot of that can be summed up with influences from the military-industrial complex.
Okay. I love it how you phrased it that way.
Yeah, that'll make sense here as I talk. So I'm the youngest of three boys, military family. My dad was in the Air Force for 23 years, from 75 into the late 90s, kind of that 80s Cold War.
Yeah.
The height of that.
Sure.
And so I was the last son, born at Edwards Air Force Base in Southern California. It's a really interesting place, a very large, if the entire base perimeter is this table, people lived in housing like over here. Test runways that overrun miles into sand beds, old lake beds, that kind of thing. Really interesting place. Got to see the space shuttle land at least once or twice when I was a kid. So that's a place in California that it would land when it couldn't land in Florida.
Yeah.
So I got to see that, and so that that military, being an Air Force brat, is shaped a lot of who I am, where I ended up, what I did. We ended up at Offutt Air Force Base in '94.
Okay. You were how old then?
I just turned 7.
Okay.
So I was born in '87. Actually came over in Mom's tummy from Europe. They were over in Germany for like 6 years. Yeah, my next older brother was born there at Wiesbaden. in Germany, and then I came off the production lines in Southern California a few months
He's
later.
sticking with the military complex.
Yeah, that's
thing
right.
here.
That's right. So
Yeah.
I came out of production in April of '87. We were there for 7 years. Dad deployed to the desert a couple times, and then we moved here, and he was medically discharged in '97
Okay.
because of, among other things, his multiple sclerosis,
Okay.
which he was diagnosed with the month I was born. So we're around off at Air Force Base my entire youth, getting into high school, that kind of thing. I thought about going into the military, it just never happened. I decided to go to school, but ended up working when I was all done with college for the Army Corps of Engineers, and so now I'm back into that civilian side of the DoD. Got back to Edwards Air Force Base for work once, and it was the same kind of depressing place it was back then. They had bulldozed the neighborhood I grew up in. It was military housing, so just picture like cinder block privacy walls, and their attempt at putting lawns in the middle of the desert. They just demoed all of that and built new housing in the desert next door, and xeriscaped all the lawns, low water blocks and stuff. And so that was interesting to see. Architectural engineering, what I went to school for, and how that ties into what I do now, is a education discipline. It's not necessarily a job title.
Right.
So architectural
Was that here,
engineering.
by the way? Did you go to
It
school
was,
here?
yeah. So
Okay.
so I started down in Lincoln, and at the time, AE was on both campuses, just a University of Nebraska thing. But because of who gave money where in the program, you could only do so much down in Lincoln, then had to come up to Omaha. So I went down to Lincoln because that's what my oldest brother had done. I was kind of going through the motions of not blazing a trail for myself yet at that time. I wasn't a super adventurous 18-year-old. Who knows what you want to do at that time?
Exactly.
When I was getting out of high school, I wanted to be a veterinarian. I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. And then I settled on wanting to design custom houses.
Okay.
But because at that time, I only understood college as being the next step from high school and not getting into a trade or something, architectural engineering was the closest thing I could find. I kept taking those aptitude tests in high school that tell you what you should be.
Hey, you're good at this.
Yeah, all of them came back
okay.
as engineer.
Yeah.
And how many actual jobs do they have in those things? Maybe
Right.
there's a lot more now, but at the time, I'm sure there were like 12 different.
Right.
It was like telling you, which Harry Potter character you take those quizzes on Facebook. That's essentially
You're
what they
Hermione.
were.
Wait,
Right.
what?
Yeah. So you should be an engineer. So I decided to go down to Lincoln for engineering, and didn't even know which discipline or specialty I wanted to do until I got down there to sign up for classes. That couple weeks before, or whenever they do that for freshmen. And so somebody there was still pushing. It was a relatively new program at the University of Nebraska, that was 2005. So at the time, it was a very fresh, maybe 4-year-old program.
Okay.
And they were trying to get up numbers. And it sounded good to me. I was into architecture and building design, and that was the closest thing to designing custom houses. I didn't realize it would be completely overkill. And it's all commercial, industrial, design. It has nothing to do with residential. And so I got through a year down in Lincoln and didn't get a lot done academically.
Naturally.
I did.
As you do.
Yeah,
What are
right.
you doing?
So I slept in a lot.
Okay.
Missed some tests.
Went to a lot of games.
Yeah, I did. I got a purple belt in judo. That was like my
Oh.
one academic
Well,
accomplishment.
there we go.
Right.
Purple belt. I
Yeah,
like that.
and so it was like half step above, that's my purse, like self-defense type class. That was a King of Hill reference. So, I came back up to Omaha, lived with mom and dad, kind of tucked my tail between my legs, and but also kind of buckled down and started studying, got more serious about school, and really started enjoying the program up at UNO, which is like the bulk, the meat of the classes actually take place. You can take a lot of the prerequisites, your whole calculus series and differential equations and all that down in Lincoln, but you don't get into the meat and potatoes of the program until you get up to Omaha. And so architectural engineering is just all the engineering systems and design that goes into making a building function. And at UNO, Those options are structures, mechanical, which would be mostly HVAC or acoustics, and
Okay.
then electrical systems, power mostly, or lighting.
Yeah.
So you pick one of those 5 specialties into your senior year and your master's. And so I stuck.
You chose.
And I chose structures. So
All right.
a lot of people
All right.
chose. A lot of people started with structures because it's the most intuitive thing. You can reach out and touch it. People built clubhouses as kids. People build, build a doghouse or something as a child, and through your youth, you have an intuitive sense of what building is, and that's a lot of what concrete and steel are. Most people don't go through an interest in thermodynamics or something like that, unless it's like a young Sheldon situation, or even electrical. I remember sticking many 9-volt batteries on my tongue as a kid, but that was like the extent of my electrical discovery. And so as we got through the program, a lot of people would peel off, decide to go mechanical instead, decide to go electrical or lighting instead, but there was a core group of us that just kind of stuck with that initial decision.
Yeah.
And that's how I would say I ended up being an architectural engineer with a specialty in structures. And so then I was hired at the Army Corps of Engineers in 2011
Okay.
into the structural section, specifically to work on for our fuels work that we do for the military. So the Army Corps of Engineers has a number of specialty offices around the country, and Omaha has several. The Omaha district is one of the biggest districts in the Army Corps of Engineers.
Shout out Omaha.
That's
Yeah,
what's
it
up,
is.
and
So-
Army Corps of Engineers.
That is true.
Right,
True.
so some of that is our river system and the size of the runoff, the watershed for the Missouri River, and then also the military bases across the Midwest and the important roles that they serve, kind of where they started in during the Cold War,
Okay.
being in the center of the country,
Yeah.
being out of reach from other countries,
Right.
and then just bringing those into the 21st century. They kept those locations and just kind of changed what they do. So we're one of the biggest, and we have several what are called mandatory centers of expertise.
Okay.
And one of those is fuel. So our engineering folks, our PMs, project managers, and even some of our construction folks in Omaha touch fuel systems like worldwide.
Interesting.
And so there's a lot of really cool work to do there, and that's what I started doing. But even leaving school, I had this idea that I was more interested in the human side of things, people communication,
Connecting,
which in the private side would translate to sales, which is kind of what I was starting to ask firms that I was trying to get internships with about. But because the government doesn't necessarily do that, that wasn't really an option. Project management's kind of, our PMs go out and do find work and that kind of thing and bring it in. Long story short, I ended up doing what I do now, which is I am our district's AE services coordinator. So when we can't do something in-house, and we do design buildings in-house, we design levee systems and that kind of thing in-house, when we can't or don't have the bandwidth or the manpower, or just don't have the specialty, we contract that work out to engineering firms. And so when we do that, we set up those big contracts, whether it's a site specific for a hospital or for something like the Stratcom replacement facility that happened down at Offutt over the last few years. I get involved to coordinate technical input into the contract with contracting, with PM, and I'm kind of this liaison between our bigger sub-organizations, just to make all that happen. And there's always plenty of work, and there's always an opportunity to meet new people, make connections, build relationships, because even in something as relatively kind of cold and indifferent as the government, all those people relationships, those relationships are super important. And I'm totally an extrovert in the sense that doing this kind of thing, interacting with people, going to a wedding, being just around a mass of people energizes me. And so I'm up walking around the majority of the day, just making sure that somebody got something. I try to avoid email and the phone.
In touch.
Right. Get out there
Rely on
and
that.
talk to folks, and that's the majority of our issues that we come across, or that somebody just didn't walk up and clarify kind of a tone inflection in an email or something.
So you mentioned like levees and stuff like that. Like obviously we had the flood a while back, and were you involved in any of that kind of stuff, or like as far as just help? Because I know I know one of the biggest things is I've read articles and stuff, like we're constantly still asking for support, with like roads, bridges, levees, all that kind of stuff. Do you have any role in that whatsoever, or does that kind of get handed off to?
Well, I will disclaim this by saying we do have an official public affairs office that answers questions about this kind of thing. However, without talking about the flood itself, reasons, that kind of thing, because that's not my specialty and I don't touch a lot of that. What I have been involved in is, and a lot of this stuff is out in the news and in papers and that kind of thing, but we are having some engineering firms do some of the levee repair designs, and I get involved in that sense and making sure that the right folks are being selected.
More of the oversight side of things.
And then also, I will get into the weeds a little bit more, one, because of my background, and two, selfishly, because of my interest when we do get into building design. And a lot of that is happening at Offutt Air Force Base right now. So part of that flood recovery is a huge effort at Offutt right now, and the Air Force is they have some disaster recovery efforts there, and then also at Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida because of some hurricane damage. So figuring out, sometimes it's an opportunity in disguise to be able to reorganize, restructure the way that related military organizations are spread around a base. It's an opportunity to not just give an older kind of crumbling infrastructure a facelift, but actually repair it and put something new in place. So that's how I get involved, or how I have been involved mostly and most actively, is through some of that ongoing recovery effort at Offutt.
That's fascinating. So okay, now you're back in Nebraska, right? You're working in the capacity of an architectural engineer, specializes in structures, working for the DoD. I guess what is, leading up to that, beyond some of the stuff you already told us, when you start working in that role, are you kind of like, I dig this. This, for me, you've talked about, hey, I wanted to be more on the personal level, the connection side of things, but is there a point when you're like, yep, this is my career, I love this, I'm gonna keep doing this, pursue this, see where that goes? Was there like a turning point when you're like, I'm married to this, but I can also look at other things on the side, which of course we'll get into.
It's actually a great touch point. So I get to tell people this all the time, but I never get to do it in this kind of capacity, so I'm really excited to share all these details.
We love it.
We are too.
So I tend to be very self-deprecating. I'm very self-critical. I try to always be improving myself.
Most perfectionists are.
So part of it was not being happy, and trying to find a balance, as constantly analyzing myself and being way too self-involved. Trying to find a balance between, am I being this whiny, always looking for greener grass millennial stereotype, or is there some concrete need for an employee to feel empowered, to feel invested in? There's touchy-feely reasons to do that, and I think that's what people push back most against, is just doing it because it makes people feel warm and fuzzy. But from kind of a colder perspective, or a more engineering kind of mindset, there's efficiencies that can be gained there. That, and very skeptical, kind of pessimistic people will say, well, organization doesn't give people benefits because it cares about them, it's doing it to keep them, and retention, all this kind of thing. Whatever. You can believe, I think there's a little bit of both. I think it depends on your own perspective and what you want to believe. But having said that, I kind of went through this identity crisis knowing structural engineering was not for me. Being at a cubicle, cranking things out day in, day out, I finally got to a more mature standpoint where I could say it just wasn't a good fit versus that's stupid. Anybody that does that is stupid. Absolutely not. It takes all kinds. And I really appreciate that what I do, what I'm interested in, the people getting out, talking to people, is relatively uncommon at work. Otherwise, I wouldn't have this little corner, this little piece all to myself that nobody else is interested in. And I'll get into a metaphor I have there. Make sure to remind me about black jelly bean work. Because it's a metaphor I have. So 3 years I was there from 2011 into early late 2013,
Mm-hmm.
I was in this role, and it had gotten to a point, and I've been pretty open with folks about this, it had gotten to a point where I had used up like all of my annual leave, all of my sick leave. I was like having to start signing things at work about like performance.
I'm trying to get
people
out of
call
here.
that people call that a PIP,
Okay.
personal improvement,
Okay.
kind of thing. Like I was not being very valuable at all from the organization's perspective, and I was having a hard time dragging myself out of bed in the morning. And finally, this opportunity came up where a woman I work with was going on maternity leave,
Mhm.
and she before she had kids, she was doing the work of like 2 people,
Mhm.
and so when she left temporarily, there was this opportunity to go try to fill in, figure out what she was doing, and that was with a separate piece of the organization with our construction
Okay.
division.
Yep.
So the government itself does not do construction anymore. We contract all of that out, but because we're contracting out so much work,
Right.
about $1.5 billion of placement in the Omaha district every year,
Mm-hmm.
there's a huge need to have people overseeing, doing the contracting stuff, doing the technical stuff, telling our contracting officers if something is technically acceptable. And so we have a huge presence in construction. A lot of that is spread out. It's not concentrated in the Omaha district office downtown, but rather spread out across the upper Midwest. And so I got over there, I got to see, there's a little bit else, more going on here. And so this is early 2014, and this ties into the books. So I had an experience years and years before where I was working for a different government organization that was closing up shop on base at Offutt, and there were a number of chairs.
Mm-hmm.
Office chairs of people that had worked there for decades and decades and decades, and some of them were just disgusting.
Here comes a metaphor, I feel like.
Well, so yes, and it was ill-advised, kind of, I call it a conscious, or what do you call it, a identity crisis. My mom said it was a crisis of ego, and at this point I can't disagree with her. But all of these chairs they were disgusting. If you can imagine somebody's using the same office chair for 10, 15 years, there are Cheeto stains. There are spots on the chairs that no longer how long they sit. They never dry. So it's like,
We've all seen stains like that.
Yeah, what is that thing? And so I'm sitting in the office, eating like a bag of
Cheetos.
Something like that. Product endorsement. This isn't going to be a very good one. And I spilled it down my front, and then look at the V between my legs on the seat of the chair, and here is this pile of orange powder, whatever type of snack it was. And so immediately, so this was 14,
Mm-hmm.
so I was, let's do the math, 26, and somewhere around there, 27. And so being in my 20s, being a very kind of egotistical, narcissistic being, I immediately went into this like flashback to the chairs in this other office, and oh my God, I'm turning into one of them. And so it inspired me to pick Beneath the Surface back up. I started writing it in 2004 at Bellevue West.
Okay.
And so 10 years later, I said, I got to do something else. I got to get the hell out of here.
Okay.
And so I started buttoning that book up, editing it, putting it together, trying to turn it into a finished product. And
so Beneath the Surface is one of, well, I guess it's the book series, the title of the book series, which is a 3-part series that you wrote, just to clarify for the audience and stuff, which we'll get into here in a little bit, but I just wanted to throw that out. So
so this all ties together. So that job lasted for a few months. My old boss came and said, the woman who I was filling in with came back off maternity leave.
Okay.
But because she was now not going to be working as much as she did before, there was still some work there, some slack to pick up. And I said, I really enjoy this.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. There's communication. I'm being a middleman.
There's a vacuum. And
I'm
going to step into that role.
So I wanted to. So I talked to my old boss, and he says, well, I'm sorry, but we really need you back. And so that weekend, I went home again, just the idea of going back to do that old work. I called in sick on Monday. I was so, whether I was being completely dramatic or not, I was like so emotionally overwhelmed with the idea
Millennial,
of having to do.
clearly.
I absolutely, absolute millennial. And the youngest, my brothers called me Dramats when we were, that was my nickname when we were kids. Yeah, I was the one to like stage a puppet show or a tumbling routine. So at any rate, and then that Friday, I was already off for a sand sculpture competition that year. And so I was only back in that guy's office for 3 days, and he brought me in Tuesday morning, and I thought, here we go. We're gonna have to go through one of our things. And he told me, hey, I just found out that you're getting pulled down to the Stratcom project. This is coming from the top. Sorry. And here I'm thinking like, well, this isn't a problem. It's something different. It's kind of exciting. I'd heard about this project, but there wasn't a whole lot of work done in the office at the time. And so it was kind of this looming thing a lot of people were talking about. I had no idea how big of a project it was. And so that was going to be just for the summer through the end of that fiscal year, which is the end of September. And I ended up being there for almost 4 years.
Whoa.
And so
now we're talking all the way into 18, right?
Into 18.
Yeah.
Until the current job that I have started.
Okay.
So another thing that was happening here is that it took a while for this crisis of ego to subside. And so that summer, I had this experience with an old woman at Panera that she needed help like putting her coffee together.
I love stuff like this.
Right, cream and sugar. And
it's
so
like I already can feel it. It's like a visibility thing where you just self-reflect and you're like, oh, whoa, did that just happen? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, no, that's absolutely right. Only I do that like almost on a daily basis. And so I tend to be the personality type, ENFP, whatever it is, that like I always think that I'm having some kind of like existential epiphany, and it's not like I just need to eat something. And so I helped this woman put her coffee together at Panera, and I just had like this flood of warm fuzzies and thought like, dear God, I need to be a nurse. I need to go back to school so I can help people. I signed up for night classes. I think my wife was incredibly distressed at the time.
You went in.
So I signed up for a biology class and a human growth and development class at Metro, and was knocking them out of the park. I had never taken those kinds of science classes before. I was always on like the applied physics side. And so I went through almost the entire summer while this job at Stratcom is ramping up, and I'm like working on schoolwork all the time because I have all these other things that I'm working on going on. I had just taken Beneath the Surface. This was the summer before. So I'm still working on Beneath the Surface. I haven't even finished it yet. I haven't self-published it yet. That wouldn't be until January 15. And so I realized that this job at Stratcom is like I'm feeling very gratified at work all of a sudden because I'm doing this, and it was relatively administrative, like menial work, but because of the people, because of the pressure and everything else, it just all coupled together to this thing that I really enjoyed. So I dropped the classes before I even finished them, and I had like A+ in both classes. I really enjoyed
Dean's
classes.
List.
Yeah.
Oh wait,
List.
nope. See you later.
Yeah, and Metro. I think Metro offers some of the best value in education in town.
Shout out Metro.
Yeah, MCC. So .neb.edu. So I continue doing this work. So in the meantime, through that fall of 14, I'm finishing up this first book. It was the first book I'd ever written. It was the first thing I'd ever packaged together as a finished product. I finger painted the cover. It was this terrible, fugly thing.
This is the first one, right?
That is the first book right there, and that's not the cover that I'm talking about, but it was something very similar to that I did myself in this vacuum. I didn't know anybody in the industry. And so January 15th came around, and I self-published this thing, started telling people about it. The margins were terrible. They were like dangling paragraphs. I knew nothing about industry standards. I tend not to research before I do things, but rather just dive in and do it and prepare later. So, first opportunity to sell this in the public was the first Comic-Con here in Omaha. Comic-Con 15 was the first big general pop culture, not kind of a specialty con, but this general pop culture con, and they did an incredible job out of the gate. I brought 50 copies of that and completely sold out. literally and figuratively.
That's awesome.
Completely sold out of 50 copies, super inspired. People read it. Hey, it's a cliffhanger. Where's the sequel? And so I met the guy who did the cover art for these books. His name is Tim Mayer. He's here in Omaha. He's an incredibly talented guy.
Shout out Tim.
Shout out Tim.
Yep.
I love you. And so he remade this cover into, if you can't see the lighter line work, there's an elephant here, and then the symbol I always envisioned as being war paint up an elephant's trunk and over their brow.
Yeah.
And that was the idea behind what that symbol is and the faction of people that it represents in the book.
Wow.
So he did that one for me and the cover for the second book, Breaking the Surface, at the same time. And I wrote, edited, and printed that second book in a year, and that's the fastest that I did any of these. But I was really inspired, and so in the books there's this disgusting, spoiler alert, flesh-eating electricity, and you don't really get anything besides it being like this technological menace in the first book. Well, in the second book, I didn't want to waste what I learned in this biology class and actually tie in all this, it's all complete BS, but all this pseudoscience about phospholipid bilayers that hold what's in a cell and keep what's outside a cell outside, and it transfers, about frequencies and how could you tear something like that apart. And so I get into all the description of how that works in the second book, and just taking that technology to like a next step, an nth degree. And so yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, please.
So
I'm going to keep going if you
No,
don't
I
stop
love
me.
that. I love that. So when you wrote the first book, how you teed that up, where you said, "Hey, I can't," we went to Ocon, I sold everything, and then everybody's reaching out saying, "Hey, it's a cliffhanger." So when you wrote the first book, did you purposely write it as a cliffhanger, or did you know, hey, when I write this, I'm going to make it a multi-part series, or was it just kind of something that was happenstance and worked out, or fate that way?
So by the time I finished it, I realized I wanted it to continue, but that's why I started calling it the Surface series, because I didn't want to call it a trilogy for trilogy's sake, because I was getting nauseous of that being done throughout pop culture.
Over. And then wait, now there's another trilogy.
Right. And then it gets turned into a movie, and the last book gets turned into 2 movies, part 1 and part, what do you know? Yeah, they've done it with everything. And I get it, but part of it was knowing that it was going to continue, and part of it was just me having to cut it off at some point to get the damn thing done. And that's a lot of what I do. I do like 80% of a project, make it work, and then lose interest and get on to something else. The books have been a little bit different, but that's a bad habit of mine. So the second book was a cliffhanger also. And I knew, like, here I am eating my words about the trilogy. I knew I could wrap it up with a third book, had all the ideas, but I gave myself a year and a half to write that one, because I'm not just, you can notice it's marginally thicker than the other 2. Just to be a pain in the butt, I actually wrote this book to be exactly 1 word longer than the first one. But the third book is like 25% longer, 20% longer, and that's because I'm not just wrapping up that story, I'm wrapping up the whole arc. And so I wanted to give it its due time. It took about 18 months to write that, and publish that early 2018. By this time, I'd gone to Omaha Comic-Con every year.
Wow.
I went this past year. We had the 5th one. And
I was supposed to go. We probably would have bumped into each other.
Yeah, you
next
should.
year.
Right. So you all should talk to Matt Fujon. He's the shout out Matt.
Yeah.
Shout out Fujon.
Yeah. So he's kind of the principal organizer of. He has a team of people that help him, and I don't want to undersell those folks, but Matt's kind of the mastermind behind that event. And so I've gotten to know him really well, and I've been back every year. I keep adding new products. So 15, 16, 18, and then the newest book was in 19. And so
show him that one, right?
Yeah, so I was finally able to collaborate with this incredibly talented young lady that, again, I met.
Dragons are meant to fly.
Dragons are meant to fly. So that's book 1 of the Lizards, Squirrels, and Men world.
So book 1, so we're doing another series.
I would like to do 7 total as the core, the kind of the core mythology of the series, and then maybe do one-offs from there. We're working on book 2 right now, but Bailey Palmer, shout out Bailey.
Hey.
Her and her sister, I met both of them at Ocomic-Con. Bailey's an incredibly talented author, just very clean, bright, happy, professional work.
Mhm.
And so I'm very happy with the life she breathed into that, make it look like a very legitimate
the cover
professional
looks
product.
awesome.
Yeah, it looks like something you'd buy in a store.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So they are all available on Amazon, by the way. So, but Bailey's sister Afton is super involved in like the 501st, the folks that dress up
Yeah.
in Star Wars.
Yeah.
So all these interesting characters I met through Comic-Con, and then realized that all of these things, if I could put a pretty bow on this, all of these things I do in my life, I realized are finding my education, what I do at work, and this person's good at this person's good at this, I can do this thing,
Mhm.
but I'm completely untalented over here. How can we pull this all together?
Yes.
So that is
Love it.
that is a mechanical, electrical, structural, and an architect working together. That is somebody from engineering in my organization and PM in construction and contracting coming together. And here it is somebody who's great at editing, a guy I went to high school with, Kevin Clayman, who has edited every book since book number 2 here.
Cool.
And Bailey and Tim Mayer and a guy I'm good friends with named Justin Schillerberg works at
Mhm.
HDR. He's another artist I've worked with to do character design for my 2 main characters from these books.
Very cool.
All these talented folks, I have a deficiency there,
Mhm.
but I know how to speak an idea I have and continue to manipulate their craft. And I mean that as
Maybe
as
different
straightforward.
phraseology.
Yeah,
leverage.
sure.
Maybe
Yeah,
Leverage,
Yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Leverage their talents and those relationships to continue to hone this into these are the exact things that I envision in my head, and here they
Yeah.
are in real life. And so
Paint that picture for them so they can go create it for
that's
you.
exactly
Absolutely.
right. And so not working in a vacuum, not working by myself, but so now I have this ability that I've discovered over the last few years of bringing these things together. And now I'm leveraging that at work in an incredibly successful sense.
Organizing people.
And
Yeah.
and so I'm really excited to continue to explore that dynamic for the rest of my life and see
Wow.
where it can take me. What else can be
Look at that.
done?
And it only
So-
took you, what, 30 years? to figure it out?
32
Yeah,
years,
30.
yeah. So I'm really excited about that. Before I forget, because I told you I'd come back to it.
Black
The
bean.
jelly bean.
Black
yeah,
jelly
that's
bean.
what I
So
meant.
what I do at work, I refer to as black jelly bean work, and a lot of metaphors that I use, I try to tie back to childhood because the closer you can get to this common childhood experience, the more universal it is. It doesn't matter what part of town somebody grew up in, what part of the country. For the most part, you can capture something in childhood, and generationally things fluctuate. But when I was a kid, the teacher would come around, whether it was Easter time or sometime in Halloween, the teacher would come around and give everybody a handful of jelly beans, right?
Yep.
And you don't like green and you don't like purple, so you guys would swap, and it was like, you know, the cafeteria at prison, you know, the fruit cocktail thing. So people are trading colors jelly beans, but the black jelly beans would just end up in the trash.
Mhm.
But invariably, there tended to be one kid in class, and I apologize if this was you, but they tended to be the smelly kid in a 4th grade. Like, who likes black jelly beans but the weird kid, you know?
Mhm.
Because my dad likes black jelly beans, so certainly a child.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Mhm.
So they just had to stand by the trash can. And they got to eat like a king, because here, no matter how many times you guys trade 1 for 1, you're going to end up with your 10 jelly beans.
Mhm.
Well, they might end up with 30.
Mhm.
And so that is what I do at work.
Mhm.
Nobody from the engineering background, has any interest in doing this touchy-feely contracting thing, and nobody from contracting has a technical background or interest in doing the tech. And so I found myself in this Venn diagram,
Interesting.
and that is black jelly bean work. So
You're the black jelly bean guy.
I
I
am.
love that.
I'm
Oh
the
my
weird.
God.
I'm the
That's
smelly
funny.
kid that likes black jelly beans, and so that is finding somebody else's trash and turning it into treasure. There's a whole number of
Mhm.
silly metaphors out there, but so that's it.
I love that, man. That's so much like,
That's like a T-shirt you need to have made.
Yeah, I do black jelly bean work.
blessed are the peacemakers, you know, the people
Right.
that can bring people together and get people to work together who might not have worked together had you not been involved, you know,
Sure.
or been the middleman to put that thing together. I love that.
Blessed are the black jelly bean kids.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure what other points you had. I do have more things I could talk about.
Yes.
Certainly, sand sculpture is one of them. So,
Yeah.
We used to do a thing.
We gotta plug that sand sculpture.
We used to do a thing in Omaha every year, and I first got involved just from seeing a flyer.
This is where I do, and I've seen you before.
Yeah?
Because we did one with Grace University.
Yeah, that
Boom.
was me.
Wow.
See?
All right.
Look at that.
See?
30 minutes
I'm like,
in.
where do I know this
we
guy
just
from?
made
The
the
whole
connection.
time I'm thinking to myself,
So this
I'm
is
like,
great. So
I
let's
know this
talk-
guy from somewhere.
Let's talk about Sand in the City. So Sand in the City is
Yeah.
a product. It is an event that is treated as a product that a fella out on the West Coast named Bert Adams, shout out Bert.
Hey, Bert.
Bert's a cool name.
He is, and he's a cool guy. Bert is a cool guy, and so Bert only has an interest in lightening things up. And so he has this product that he brings to cities. The cities, depending on which organization is using it, can use it for different things. And that product is this event called Sand in the City, where he hosts and you know, a lot of the organization and the logistics come from the organization that are hosting him. But he puts through classes. He talks through how the sand sculpture is done. He helps these folks find and source the sand. We have some really good sharp sand here that is good for sculpture on farmland around. He brings in coaches from around the country, and so that all costs money to make this thing happen. He expects to get paid. The folks that are coming in to act as coaches expect to be compensated for their work.
Yeah.
But the neat thing is a lot of the teams then are part of the fundraising. So the teams will pay to participate. You can use it in Grace University's case. They used it as a team building exercise.
Okay.
And that's really how it's sold. It's an awesome thing to participate in. And here in Omaha, it was the the Nebraska Children's Home Society that used it as a fundraising event. And so it went on for about 10 or 12 years.
Wow.
I got involved at maybe year 3.
Okay.
I saw a flyer at school, at UNO, and I was maybe a sophomore. I forget what year that was. I was maybe a sophomore or junior. I was still a student, and they needed artists. So on a team, you have the team that comes from whatever business is participating. You have an artist that is either from that business, or if they don't have artsy folks, need to get paired up with somebody, an artist, and then a coach. And sometimes the coaches would bounce around between teams depending on how much experience a team had. And then there was a new team.
That's I remember.
And so I signed up as an artist. I got paired up with Mutual of Omaha because they didn't have an artist yet. And a number of those folks on that team, I worked with them for 2 years. They did it 2 years in a row. And a lot of those folks, my understanding was, a number of the ladies on that team had adopted children through the Nebraska Children's Home Society, which is an adoption agency. And so they knew about it. I think they'd even volunteered to run water around to people and that kind of thing the day of the event. And
Which
so
people again have no idea.
Oh, it is
when you
an
think
incredible
sand
amount.
sculpting.
Right.
It's not like, oh, we're just. And here's the cool thing that I liked about it is dude, this guy right here has no artistry in him whatsoever. Like, you tell me to go build a sandcastle and it's not gonna be very good. But when you go to this and there's 20 of you,
yeah.
and then you got a guy like this who brings over your picture and he's like, hey, here's what we're doing, and you're like, wait, what? This is like Monsters Inc. And there's people doing themes of Frozen and all this stuff, and you're like, there's no way we're gonna do that. But literally, they lay it out, and you just, all right, get up there and you start building stuff. You have these little utensils and all this other stuff, and you're like, this is pretty awesome. And then at the end of the day, you're like, holy crap, we just made that
in 6 hours.
Yeah.
From pounding sand up in plywood formwork 8 feet tall to tearing all that down and carving this now solid block of sand. 6 hours.
Dang.
So you're breaking your back. You have some folks that are beyond help in their artistic abilities.
Yep.
And so that's a lot of
This guy.
the boyfriends and husbands will show up to help all these
yeah.
women that signed up through work. A lot of the ladies will have some natural artistic ability, and then it's like, all right, I'm on shovel duty, and the boys want to get in there, but then invariably somebody's like, oh, this is pretty. Hey, look, I'm doing clouds. Hey mom, look, I'm doing clouds. And so I got signed up with Mutual Omaha, and I think it was a case of not knowing what I couldn't do, not knowing your own limitations. that first year we got second or third place.
Whoa.
Like 17 teams. Yeah, rookie
Wow.
team. I had never done it before, and we did a Madagascar theme.
Nice.
We had they were like smashed in a car, and the giraffe's head was coming out of the car, and so it was a lot of fun. And so I did that. I was involved in that event for 10 years.
Where did they do it at? Where was it held?
So it started downtown at in the what was the Century Link, I think. No, it might have been the Quest Center at that time.
Oh,
in the parking lot.
In the parking lot.
Yeah, so they would work with what is that organization? Mecca? That owns all the parking lots downtown.
Yeah.
They would work with to get a parking lot space. Now where the Capitol District is, that used to be just two parking lots next to each other.
Yeah.
We had the event there one year. The last few years that they held it, it was at the Baxter Arena, the parking lot there. And there was some, they had the farmers market going on at Exarban, and so there was some access there. But those events tend to have a lifespan unless there's a lot of diligent work being put back into them. And so there's some places around the West Coast and other parts around, other places around the country that Bert Adams has taken this thing where they're continuing to live on for 20 years or so. So we made it about 10, 12 years here, and I think they're having a hard time keeping the energy pushed into it. I don't know that moving to the Baxter was necessarily the right idea. But 2 years ago, the Children's Home Society decided to stop doing it. So I think Bert would be very happy to come back here if there was another.
Let's bring it back.
There was
Come on,
because
Scott.
it can be used. So the Nebraska Children's Home Society used it as a fundraiser and raised a crazy amount of money from the teams paying to participate, sponsors, folks paying to vote with sand dollars. But it could be used. It's been used. I went and coached a team in Iowa City, and it was just part of their summer arts festival. It can be used as a
super fun.
really unique anchor event, especially in this part of the country where you're not going out on the beach and seeing people like Bert practice. Like
they had one in they had one in IB in Imperial Beach in San Diego when I lived down there. They would do it every year in IB, and from what I know, I have some friends out there still that I follow on Facebook, and they take the family out there pretty much every year. So I see they're still doing it there. I didn't know until today in this conversation that that's what it was, but I always knew it was kind of this cool reoccurring thing that we'd take time out and go check it out and stuff. And it was, man, I would always be just blown away by some of the stuff that.
Dude, that was the thing. Like at the end, you just you walk around and you look at everybody's theme and you're like, man. This is crazy. Like we all did this in 6 hours, and I remember there was one year where it was raining, and so you're just you're dealing with, don't let that get outside the tent, because it'll just wash away, and you're just constantly dealing. But it was great for, like you said, team building, just taking out getting a break from work and just focusing on a good cause, and also just kind of fulfillment of wow, we did this. This is awesome.
Yeah, any kind of manual labor where you get to see, and in this case it was manual art, where you get to see that finished product at the end.
Yeah.
People connect with that, no matter how long they've worked in an office. Everybody I know, and we say this when it's nice out, but almost anybody I work with would rather be at home, building a patio or something in their backyard. Yeah. I think people in general as a species, and as an international culture, we are drawn towards working with our hands and seeing, at the end of the day, working together as a team and seeing something be made.
Yep.
But all the main players, all the big Omaha players would be involved in this. Kiewit would have 3 different teams.
Sure. Mutual, I'm sure.
So there's an opportunity there, I think, to bring that.
We could get a Berkshire Hathaway, maybe a Corbank team.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and it can be put towards a good cause if it's a fundraiser, if it's just an anchor event for a bigger festival. And it's really something that people don't get to see all the time. So I really enjoyed that. And those last couple of years, being involved as an artist, I would do full service for the teams I worked with. I was with Grace University for several years, and 3, 4, 5 years. And I would build the forms and everything. They would, give me a budget for materials, but I would build these plywood and 2x4 forms and keep them in my garage at home and it's a lot of time investment. And so what I ended up doing instead was working as a coach for a couple teams here, and that's helped the organization save money. They weren't having to fly me in or pay for a hotel and that kind of thing. But so I was trying to do my part to keep the thing going and keep costs down. But even coaching, it's a lot of fun. So typically what happens in one of these things, not only do you have a contest and competition going on, but then that'll happen on a Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday things are open to the public, and so you have the coaches working on a display sculpture, and you can get really creative with the ways that you have a foreground piece, a background piece, and then a traffic for folks to come in, take a picture where they're fully immersed in, a snowboarding scene.
It's
or
a
something.
diorama, right?
Right, and you stand in it and take a photo, and if you're very if you want to leverage the opportunity, $5 for an Instagram, opportunity like that is great. That folks can get in the thing, have sand in front of them, behind them, and it's just so there's a lot of ways to make those kinds of events work if you're kind of willing to go there. But I would love to see that come back to Omaha. I would be
shout out.
I would be happy. Yeah,
Bert.
City. Give me a call. So yeah, sand sculpture.
So as we wrap up all this stuff, because we just talked about a lot of things, we always ask this question towards the end.
Well, wait! Don't get in there just yet. I want to hear more about the books. I want to hear about the creative process. See if we can dive into that a little bit.
Okay, so I have I just made this joke to my wife last night, and I kind of wasn't joking, but I say it in a way that I can go, I was just kidding, just in case she responds, like, hey, have you guys ever done, such and such? Like, no, I've never. Oh yeah, no, me either, is that kind of thing. But we talked about this a little bit as I was coming in. I'm ripping open all this shelves and storage underneath my stairs. My house is about 105 years old this year.
Okay.
And I'm building a sound booth to read these books and record.
Yeah.
I have some of this equipment already at home, but I'm trying to control sound quality, that it doesn't sound like I'm in my basement, but rather more professional. Audible has and Amazon have quality requirements. And just the idea of getting down there, making a little bit of progress. I told my wife, I have to create or I'll die. and that could be
millennial.
I know that could be cooking. That could be cooking. That could be writing. Writing is really my deep love. The thing I have the most connection with my creative process, my creativity. But the Surface series is a sci-fi trilogy. I started writing the first one when I was a junior at Bellevue West.
You said trilogy.
I know. I actually I couldn't help myself but start writing like a spin-off book. So that it could be the series and no longer a trilogy.
So give us like a quick synopsis, I guess, for the, without going too deep or too beneath the surface, but maybe for the audience, like if you could kind of sum up the 3 books or just give a quick rundown. We've touched on it a little bit, of course.
Yeah.
But go into that a little bit. So people, if you're into sci-fi and stuff, of course, Matt will appreciate your support. These books are all available on Amazon, and we'll try to include links here a little bit later today in the comments, so you guys can go check them out. Definitely show your support to this man too as well. So
so there was a so I told you. So understand, I started writing these books in 2004.
Okay.
I was a junior in high school and had no concept of time or the future. And although I should have at that point in my life, but I was a giant baby. I still kind of am. So this global event happens in 2021, which again in 2004 was like, oh, that's never going to happen. Yeah. Pretty soon it's going to be alternate history, but this global event happens in 2021, and the governments of the world have these scientific complexes underwater that are conveniently available to house millions of people. And so 3 generations later,
dumbs nowadays, guys.
Yeah. So 3 generations later, it is 2084, which is of course a nod to the classic novel 1984.
Yep.
You'll catch a lot of that. Again, I was in high school when I started writing this. And the main character is 3 generations into this thing. It's all he's ever known. He lives down in this underwater complex near the Hawaiian Islands.
Cool.
And so he is absolutely a consumer. The government, the authorities realize that rather than using this militaristic regime, an authoritative kind of thing to keep people under control, it is a lot more effective to just keep them placated and distracted.
Mm-hmm.
And so, which maybe we see something going on.
Yeah.
So they have a very consumer-driven lifestyle. He is absorbed with racing submarines and virtual reality arenas and young people stuff.
Entertainment and technology.
That's right. Now, a lot of what you read in that book sounds like it's only 5-10 years away, and some of that is on purpose because they only needed to get to a certain point and then just maintain status quo.
Sure.
To kind of keep folks in this pacified lifestyle. And so his grandfather was brought into the place when this event happens. He would be around 14 years old right now, the grandfather of the main character, and he's a key player in the first book. And he is, unlike most of society, he's absolutely a rule breaker. He hates authority. He doesn't like rules. He doesn't like that they're still down there. And he finally gets, the main character's name is Sambato.
Okay.
He finally gets Sambato to start questioning, why are we still down here? We don't belong down here. It's the first time that he's ever questioned his reality, let alone authority. He gets this like overwhelming epiphany that, oh, the government is not this faceless, infallible entity, but in fact it's made up of individuals. And that can be promising if you're optimistic about human nature, or that can be incredibly terrifying if you realize like, oh wow, I screw up all the time. That means that the individuals that work in the government can do that too. So it's this big thing for him. And so he meets this young lady named Kaluna, who is of Hawaiian descent in the first book, and the two of them are essentially attached at the hip through the rest of this trilogy.
Okay.
Now to zoom back out and get out of the details, each book they run into a faction of people, and that is the symbols that you see on the front of the book: the elephants, the spring, and the stewards. And so each faction that they run across has this central tenet that they really care about, and are in and of themselves positive things. But like most groups, they all take them to an extreme.
Sure.
And so the elephants want people to know the truth about what really happened. The spring wants to see, they actually spring up, sorry, boo. After the first book, to deal with that confrontation between the government and these rebels and try to just smash the violence. It's a group of all women. They're sick of men just developing bigger and badder clubs to beat each other over the head with, and so they want a smarter solution to the technology. Or use technology for a smarter solution to end this violence. And then the stewards are this group of essentially environmental extremists who say that stewardship is sacrifice. If the world is going to, the natural world, the planet, and therefore us are going to continue to survive, it's going to take human beings extraordinarily taking a back seat to nature for the first time in human history. So all of these things are not bad ideas. They take them to an extreme. So Sambato and Kaluna, as two young people, interact with these factions as they're kind of going on this crazy action adventure, and their ultimate goal is to try to synthesize those things into a more balanced lifestyle that isn't just overwhelmingly stressful for the rest of their lives. And I see a lot of that going on right now, that people are trying to be, people our age, you can't be absolutely 100% conscientious about everything,
Right.
or it just sucks
Right.
all the energy out
Right.
of you. And so
Life's not fun.
So right, and so who wants to do that? So it's a lot of action and adventure. It is sci-fi in the sense that it takes place right around the corner. There's speculative technology, but really it's kind of this humanistic story of two young people just trying to make sense of
Their reality.
their reality.
Interesting, man. And then even it sounds like, maybe I deduced a little bit from your explanation there, that they're trying to work amongst the three tribes to almost be the mediator, or be the conduit that makes them all kind of work together and live synchronistically. Is that a word? I don't know.
Synergistically.
Yes.
Some of that happens in the second book as they're making their way through, but it does end up being, they come to the conclusion that if they try to start dictating what they consider this balanced lifestyle to the rest of these folks, that they're doing the same thing, and inevitably they'll fall victim to the same kind of, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So really at the end of the story, they have settled down somewhere, I'm not going to say where, by themselves, and are just trying to do good by themselves, for themselves, and maybe there's some lost opportunity there.
Okay.
But it's a lot of fun.
Cool.
It's a lot of fun. It's a fun read. It's a super fast read. They're on Amazon.
Awesome.
So, yes.
You guys got to check these out for sure. And then give us a quick of the children's series that you got going. So
Yeah,
it's a
so
children's book.
a world of lizards, squirrels, and men that's supposed to be kind of tongue-in-cheek and silly. There are no lizards, squirrels, there are human beings, but the lizard speaks to this first race that you're going to be introduced to in the first couple books, and they're called the Drake. They're these dragon-inspired creatures that live in a cave system. In this mountain, they're hiding out from people because people are bad, and people chased them into the caves hundreds of years ago. So these books are much more purposely STEM inspired. They are meant for kids that are starting to gain more confidence in reading. They look and feel like a big kid's book, but there's larger format. There's about an illustration per chapter, and so it's kind of a training wheels book. But I don't dumb it down. I think there's plenty of things that are dumbed down to kids, and I think there are plenty of things where kids aren't treated like kids and are exposed to ridiculous. I wanted to find a mix between the two. So these books are going to have these huge story arcs between them, you know, kind of the Marvel, Disney, they're doing these big things, and but did you realize, he knew who he was the whole time, you know, that kind of thing. I think kids can appreciate that kind of thing instead of really turning it into kind of a sappy, obviously educational thing. I wanted it to be a fun story first, educational second. So I have some engineering principles in there. In the first book, Draken, the main character, learns about a steam-powered drill. He learns about pulleys and how to make work easier and lifting. And so he puts all these things together, and it's about developing a plan, absolutely based on my hyperactive, youthful self and my relationship with my mother. That's a huge part of these books.
Oh, very cool.
And so I'm really excited about that. The second book, he's 100 years older, so you also see progression. A lot of children's books, there are these static characters that are always wearing the same outfit. In these books, the first couple books, he's turning into a full-grown dragon, and that takes them hundreds of years.
Wow.
And so you see him progress as a character across the books, and you'll see that in the cover and the artwork,
Very cool.
and the story. And so that world is huge, and I have a hard time not creating worlds that are bigger than our own. And so I have all kinds of things planned for that. I'm really excited about it. And the second one is called, so the first one is called Dragons Are Meant to Fly.
Okay.
The second book is called Humans Are People Too.
And that one's out, or it's not out yet?
It will be out probably this spring. We're working
Okay.
on the illustrations right now. I've done a lot of the editing already. And so I'm shooting for maybe late spring, early summer. So,
Very cool.
Yeah.
Man,
I know.
it's like,
It's a lot.
and we could just sit here for days.
I know.
you know?
Yeah, I really could. Yeah, I need a responsible adult to cut me off. So.
Ryan, follow-ups, anything, or?
No, I mean, I think we come down to obviously our question at
That's
the end.
right.
Oh.
You know, that we like to ask, you know, all of our people when we go through like this process with them and hear their stories and things like that. And I think a big thing about us is we're always thinking about leaving a legacy, you know, and what that looks like, and how do we want people to remember us, and all those types of things. And so as we've obviously covered a ton of things today, and you think about your life and you think about where you're at and where you're placed, like, what type of legacy do you want to leave here in Omaha and in this community and with your life?
You know, I wasn't sure what you were going to ask me, and I read that question. And, you guys prepared me a little bit for this, and I hadn't thought of anything until you were asking it. And so this is what popped into my head. I have a 9-month-old daughter, Francesca. She's absolutely gorgeous.
Such a cool name.
And Francesca Gabrielle Hebert. FGH, 3 consecutive letters. My wife kept.
You would do that.
Yeah, no,
you would do that.
She got, stop making connections with initials. Nobody cares about that. Well, so anyway, and I'm thinking a lot about what I would and wouldn't be disappointed about as she gets older. Because if we're being honest with ourselves, people do have those thoughts in the back of their head about if my kid ended up doing this or did this for a living, that I might be disappointed. And it sounds unrealistic, and it sounds like I'm being disingenuous, but I want her to be a good person, regardless of what she's doing. I don't care if she ends up with some kind of minimum wage service related job for the rest of her life. What she makes, how she makes it, I want her to be a good person, and that's the legacy that I want to pass on in these things. I write these books because I have to. I have to get this creative energy out, or I really get myself into trouble. And I just like to create, I like to share, I like to make people smile. I don't always have to be a people pleaser, but I just want people to think that I was a good person.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that I was, oh Matt, you do, how do you, is there anything you can't do? And honestly, the answer to that question is accept a compliment graciously, without like, oh no, stop, come on. I do all of these ridiculous things that a lot of people would be afraid to. I don't mind speaking in public. I don't mind getting in front of a camera. But then I have issues with a lot of things that other people don't. I have a hell of a time getting up at a decent hour in the morning. I am not great with self-control. I'm not great with moderation. So there's these other things that I feel like most people don't struggle with that I have an incredible struggle with, and everything else that most people struggle with comes very naturally to me. And so I don't care about being recognized as any of those things. I want to be a genuine person. I want to be kind, and if I'm being a little transparent right now, reflect what I would call Christ-like behavior. My personal relationship with God, I'm not super loud about it, but it is a very foundational and calming, reassuring force in my life. And if that's all it is for people, then what's so wrong about that, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so being a good person, being kind to people, taking opportunities to reach out, go above and beyond to make their lives easier, more calm, peaceful. I guess that's it.
Awesome.
I don't have to
That's
be remembered.
not it. That's awesome.
Part of it is to not being remembered as I've come to peace with the fact that I can't chase down being a writer, because then I not only have the conditions for success, but I also have the conditions for failure.
Yeah.
Right.
And so when you do that with writing, with acting, with all of these different things that I do, you're setting your conditions for your own failure as much as success. And so instead, the thing that I've been trying to do now is just, I want to write. If I'm doing it, then I'm doing it. But as soon as you talk about writer, then there's a standard, then there's a person you're comparing yourself to.
Focus on the artistry.
And it really becomes unhealthy quickly that you're going to find, Isaac Asimov and all these other people that folks worship that were really well known for a reason. But is that a realistic expectation to compare yourself to? So I want to be genuine. I want to be kind of transparent, authentic, and just kind. There's not enough of that in the world. So
Amen.
That's what I would shoot for.
That's awesome.
And that's all I want for my child. If my wife and I end up having kids, plural, that's all I really hope for.
Yeah.
There's so many other metrics that the world can come up with themselves with status and wealth and these kind of things that are obvious, kind of low-hanging fruit to say you really shouldn't, chase after these things. But what about relationships and all these other things that are a little more gray? Should you put those on a pedestal? And really, to me, it comes down to being kind and trying to make life easier for other people.
Man, that's awesome. That's powerful stuff, guys. And I think too, a lot of things you say, I resonate with quite a bit myself. We didn't even really get into covering that ground at all. And there was some other stuff that we had in our notes that we really wanted to hit. And man, I think we'll definitely have to have you back on so we can go deeper into some of the other things, because I'm definitely there with you. I have struggled with some of that stuff myself as well, as far as like the self-realization of the more that you chase towards something, oftentimes the further away from you it gets. And it can be a struggle that I think a lot of people can have, and so it speaks volumes into me as well, and I'm sure folks in our audience too probably, but like I said, maybe TBD for another date or something. We can scratch the surface, go a little bit deeper.
Yes,
and that's good stuff. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't you give a couple shout outs, maybe if folks beyond, your books and stuff being on Amazon, if people are interested in hearing maybe your story or maybe more about what you're offering, some of the other things that you do, give some shout outs for how they can connect with you.
Yeah, sure. So I consolidated the Beneath the Surface series. Used to have its own Facebook page. It might still be floating around out there. I think I closed it down, but I realized I should really consolidate that all down. So if you go to Facebook, I have a page, Matt Hebert Books.
Okay.
So it's at Matt Hebert Books on Facebook. And then also an email address, matt.hebert.books. That's Hebert, books@gmail.com. And folks are welcome to drop me a line. I have an Amazon page, an author page set up that is Amazon/authors/Matt Hebert.
Okay.
So there's plenty of opportunities. Reach out, ask about self-publishing books. That's a real hurdle for a lot of folks. And it is a steep learning curve, but I kind of have it down. It's a lot easier than it seems to talk about writing, creativity. I have a ton of thoughts on that I could continue to share. TV stuff. We didn't even get into commercials and all that ridiculous stuff. Apparently, Metro Credit Union commercial. Sorry, Metro Credit Union commercial came out this weekend, and a bunch of people. I don't know when commercials come out until I come in on a Monday, and 20 people. Hey, I saw you on TV. Were you on TV? And so, and I'm acting like I don't like.
You were getting a mortgage in the commercial.
I'm playing a contractor. I'm like playing a 2x6 or something with a chop saw. So. So yeah, all kinds of things. I would absolutely love to come back. I love to field questions, connect with people.
Cool.
I can sell these books directly to folks
Awesome.
locally also. For even with like a nominal shipping charge in total, it's still going to be less than what you pay on Amazon.
Okay.
Which is a little bit of it for folks, maybe saving a couple bucks, but also it gives me an opportunity to sign it before I send it to them.
There you go, guys.
And that's a little bit too.
Yeah.
So
PM.
one last quick thing to talk about for the Dragon book,
Sure.
the kids' books. I had a GoFundMe set up to help pay for the illustration costs, which were relative to the sci-fi novels was a disproportionate cost because that's how a book like that works.
Yep.
And so my pitch to people is not, hey, you're helping subsidize me. You're helping subsidize the person who's buying the book, because what that allowed me to do by cutting out that overhead out of the product is I'm selling those based on printing costs alone. So I buy these books from Amazon, or if you buy them directly, there's a certain amount of money that the thing costs to make, to print up and bind and all that. There is what I get, and then there's what Amazon gets. So when you buy them directly from me, you don't have to pay that Amazon portion.
Okay.
And then with that book, they're $5 a piece.
Wow.
And there's a page in
That's
there
super
that thanks
affordable.
all the folks that
Yeah.
gave to that GoFundMe. I have a second one set up for the second book right now. A GoFundMe page helped me publish my second, or illustrate my second kids book or something like that. And so the first one was completely successful. The second one's going really well right now. And again, I'll put your name in the book. It's really about making them affordable for that. It should be as easy as possible for a parent that wants their kid to get into reading, to be enthusiastic about reading, to say yes to buying a book, and that it shouldn't be a financial burden. So I just wanted to mention that too.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Pick them up, guys. I'm definitely going to have to pick one up, at least for my nieces and nephews, and kind of take a look and get more of a first-hand knowledge myself, so that's awesome.
A lot of fun, very light, really inspiring, kind of ask questions about how things work and getting into that engineering mindset. So.
Cool. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you
guys.
very much.
guys.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We will catch you next time on Access Omaha. Let us know if you have any questions. Message us down in the comments, or shoot us a direct message. We're happy to help. Boom. Peace.